A very good evening to each and every one of you, and a warm welcome to this webinar organized by Ashakiran.
You're not audible.
Hello. A very good evening to each and every one of you, and a warm welcome to this webinar organized by Ashakiran Jesuit Study House in collaboration with the Department of Political Science, St. Aloysius College Autonomous, Mangalore, on the topic, Know Your Rights Before You Fight. At the very outset, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our eminent speaker, Mr. Clifton de Rosario, Advocate, Manthan Law National Convener, All India Lawyers Association for Justice. Our beloved principal, Reverend Dr. Father Pravin Martis S.J., Reverend Father Alphonse Fernandez S.J., the Superior of Ashakiran, Dr. Rose Vera de Souza, the Head of the Department of Political Science, and all of you, dear participants. The Jesuits have been constantly and actively engaged in fighting for the rights of the people, particularly the rights of the poor and the marginalized sections of society since its foundation. The eminent figures, such as Father Jerome de Souza, S.J., were the member of the Indian Constituent Assembly and 4 times India's delegate to the United Nations General Assembly. Today, we have Father Stan Swami, S.J., who is now in jail fighting for the rights of the Adivasis and a voice of the voiceless, and many other Jesuits and collaborators fighting tirelessly for such similar causes in different capacities. We at Ashakiran Jesuit Study House have organized this webinar in collaboration with the Department of Political Science, St. Aloysius College Autonomous, Mangalore, to help us to go deeper into our rights and therefore understand better the issues and rights that pertain to the country and its people. I request Brother Pratap to recite the poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear, by Rabindranath Tagore, to remind ourselves of the very foundations and spirit of our nation and the very values of our Constitution.
Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out and the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thought and action, into the heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake.
Thank you, Brother Pratap, for uplifting us in spirit through the reading of the poem. We have with us Father Kevin Siqueira, representing Ashakiran Jesuit Study House, to give the welcome address. Over to you, Father. Father Kevin?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It is my privilege and honor to welcome you all for today's national webinar on Know Your Rights Before You Fight, organized by Ashakiran Jesuit Study House, Mangalore, in collaboration with the Department of Political Science, St. Aloysius College, Mangalore. The preamble of our Constitution states the source of authority, the nature of Indian state, and its objectives. The source of authority is we, the people of India. The nature of Indian state is a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic polity, and its objectives are justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. In the present scenario, the source, the nature of Indian state, and objectives of our constitution are being influenced by visible and invisible forces. The rule of the mighty and majoritarianism have become the norm of the day. The autonomy of democratic institutions is waning. The political and capitalistic powers seem to stifle the polity's right to dissent. While the political narrative of Indian democracy is being transformed, how do we as responsible citizens come out from our shells to attest and affirm our right for the better future? Today we have with us Mr. Clifton de Rosario, advocate, co-founder of Manthan Law, national convener of All India Lawyers Association for Justice, who is one such responsible citizen fighting for a better future. I extend a warm welcome to Mr. Rosario on behalf of Ashakiran Jesuit Study House and St. Aloysius Institution Fraternity. We have with us dear Reverend Dr. Father Praveen Martis S.J., Principal of St. Aloysius College, Mangalore. We appreciate your constant support and encouragement towards the growth of the institution. On behalf of all the participants, I extend a warm welcome to you, dear Father Praveen. I welcome Father Alphonse Fernandez S.J., Superior of Ashakiran Jesuit Study House, Mangalore, who supported and guided us in organizing this webinar. We welcome you, Father Alphonse. Organizing this webinar in association with St. Aloysius College is only possible with the help of Ms. Rose Vera D'Souza, HOD of Political Science. We welcome you with our grateful hearts. Finally, I extend a very sincere welcome to our core team of this webinar and all the participants of this webinar. We have participants from Karnataka, Kerala, Northeast, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, Goa, and UAE. Ashakiran means a ray of hope. It is a Jesuit study house, and we have Jesuit students studying here from near and far. Please visit our website or social media handles to know more about Ashakiran. Have an insightful and fruitful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Father, for your warm words of welcome. Our beloved principal has always instilled a sense of direction in this institution in all our undertakings. He has been a source of inspiration for all of us. We are able to organize this webinar because of his support and guidance. Dear Father, we are all happy to have you amidst us. I request our beloved principal to share a few words with us.
Good evening to all of you. I'm extremely happy to be present here for the national webinar on Know Your Rights Before You Fight by Mr. Clifton de Rosario. This is the third or fourth similar webinar that we are organizing here at St. Aloysius College in collaboration with the Ashakiran Jesuit House. You know the importance of human rights. Human being is a gift given by God, and by mandate, we are called to respect one another. But today, what is happening? We have raised that concern already, and we need to really know our rights. Ignorance is not just to escape saying that I do not know. Rather, when the things are not going in the right way, I think each person has to take responsibility and know his or her right and see that we can live in this world, especially in our country, in a peaceful manner. How do you really make that possible? I think Mr. Clifton today will enlighten our hearts and minds towards it. We have a constitution. That means we have got a democratic right. We've got a place for everyone to respect one another and live peacefully. But that right itself is taken away by the people who have got might and people who do not respect these rights. And we know who they are. Already it's mentioned that they are visible and invisible, minds and hearts with us. But unless the people who really fight for it, we cannot get the respect that we would like to have. So I'm really happy that Ashakiran Jesuit House and St. Aloysius College Department of Political Science is organizing such a wonderful webinar today, that you're all part of it. I'm glad that you would definitely be engaged and understand your rights and fight for it. I would like to especially thank Father Alphonse Fernandez and our scholastics for taking this initiative. Also, Dr. Rosario de Souza, the HOD of Political Science Department, for organizing this wonderfully well. Once again, my gratefulness to our resource person, Mr. Clifton de Rosario, for accepting our invitation. And I also wish all our participants all the best. Let us have this enlightening session. Thank you. God bless us.
Thank you, Father, for your words of inspiration, insight, and encouragement. May I request Mr. Alvin de Souza, Assistant Professor from the Department of Political Science, to introduce to us the eminent speaker, Mr. Clifton de Rosario, for this webinar. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, one and all. Mr. Clifton de Rosario, an advocate at Bangalore, graduated in law from Bangalore University and civil engineering from MS Ramaya Institute of Technology, Bangalore University. He is the co-founder of Mantham Law, along with Maitri Krishnan and Raghupati S., through which he tries to give justice to those who lack to justice, especially the working class and the urban poor communities. He was a full-time activist with Narmada Bachao Andolan from 1999 to 2003. Presently, he is an advisor to the Commissioner of the Honorable Supreme Court for the state of Karnataka for Right to Food case, member committee constituted by Honorable High Court of Karnataka on child malnutrition, board member of Jana Sahayog, Organization for Slum Dwellers, editorial board member of Movement of India, a bi-monthly magazine of the National Alliances of People's Movement, and also associated with various unions and slum groups. He was involved in various relief and rehabilitation work like tsunami-affected areas in Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry, earthquake in 2001 in Gujarat, flood-affected areas of North Karnataka, etc. He has also co-directed documentaries and films like Outside Mercy, which is related to Dalits, and The Hands That Clean the City on Safai Karmacharis. He also participated in fact-finding missions on accidents of manual workers, living and working condition of Safai Karmacharis, construction workers, atrocities on Dalits in village across Karnataka, and slum evictions and rehabilitations. He has taught certain courses in National Law School of India University and St. Joseph College, Bangalore, and numerous NGO representatives, youth, union workers, and grassroots leaders. He is a person who is in the field working for the vulnerable in the society. We are happy to have you, Mr. Clifton de Rosario. We request you to speak on Know Your Rights Before You Fight. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd requested Pratap to play a video. If we can start with that video, and then there are a few thoughts that I have which I would like to share with you. Pratap, is it possible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Pratap. Please play this video.
I wish to start this video by saying in the context in which I am. Right now, NIA is interrogating me. They have done 15 hours of interrogation, and still they want me to go to Bombay, which I am saying I will not go to Bombay for reasons that I will explain later. Now, a little background about my being and active and in Jharkhand is in the context of Jharkhand becoming a separate state. And so everybody wanted it as a state, but then the issues were there. The issues were especially displacement, land alienation because of mining, factories, townships, dams, and people were not taken into confidence. Hardly only minimal compensation was being paid to them. So we took it as a challenge and say how young people can take this as a life issue and fight it out. So in this process, some very helpful rulings or laws were passed by the Indian Parliament, and particularly one PESA Act, which gives significant powers to the Gram Sabha, whatever happens in the village, for it to be consulted and to get its consent. The other is the Land Acquisition Act, which for the first time recognizes the need to get the consent of the people, of the landowners, and a fair compensation to them. So this kind of opened the way for us, and people started to claim their rights. But as they claimed, they were just being thrown into jail. So in 2017, I gave a call to whoever I knew, not only in Jharkhand, but in all the central tribal states of Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, and Bengal. So we came together, we have formed a body called Persecuted Prisoner Solidarity Committee. And through that, we had planned to take up, first to do a study of the nature of under-trial prisoners in all these states, and then to have recourse to legal action so that justice can be done. In this process, I have filed a case against the Jharkhand state in Jharkhand High Court on behalf of about 3,000 young Adivasis who are languishing in the jail. It is this which became a bone of contention with the state, and they wanted to put me out of the way. And one easy way was to implicate me in some serious cases. And this case, it so happened the Bhima Koregaon, a place that I have never been to in all my life. I was implicated there. I was raided twice. First it was done by Pune police, then it was forcibly taken over by NIA. They have done interrogation of me for about 15 hours in the month of July. I was interrogated for 15 hours during a span of 5 days. Apart from my biodata and some factual information about Bagaita, about Patalgadi issue, about Bhima Koregaon movement, etc., for which whatever they asked I provided, and some persons whom I had come across in this process. They started to put before me certain extracts supposedly taken from my computer. Extracts which were, Maoists were communicating with each other. And in some extracts, even my name was mentioned. So they said, where did he meet? My first question was, who is the person writing? To whom was it written? On which date it is written? Is there a signature to what is written? None of it was there. So I just denied and disowned every single extract that was put before me, except one, where Sudha Bharadwaj and myself, we were the co-conveners of this PPSC. We had issued a call to all human rights organizations all over the country, explaining what PPSC is about and requesting them, pleading them to come join hands so that it's a common effort. So these extracts were all interpolations put into my computer. So I took that stance very clearly. And finally, now they are even asking me to go to Bombay for further interrogation, which I am refusing to go because my age, I have certain ailments. There is the epidemic which is ravaging the country. And the Jharkhand government itself has given directions that elderly people may not travel or appear in public. Even these, I don't want to risk myself. And on the other hand, I am ready for further interrogation if NIA would want it, but through video conference. This is something that I am communicating to them. And let us hope that some human sense will prevail. And if it does not, I am ready, and I hope all of us, all those who know me and who are concerned about me, will also be ready to face what is to be faced. I just want to end by saying, what is happening to me is not something unique happening to me alone. It's a broader process that is taking place all over the country. We are all aware how prominent intellectuals, lawyers, writers, poets, activists, student leaders, they are all put into jail just because they have expressed their dissent or raised questions about the ruling powers of the India. So we are part of the process. As such, in a way, I am happy to be part of this process because I'm not a silent spectator, but I'm part of it, part of the game, and ready to pay the price, whatever be it. Thank you for your attention.
Can I continue, Pratap? Pratap, can I continue?
Sir, continue.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, I thought that it's important to start with that video. That's a video of Father Stan Swami. Father Stan Swami is a 84-year-old priest who spent his entire life working among Adivasis. He, in Jharkhand, he was arrested on the 8th of October, and this video that we played for you was recorded 2 days before this, maybe around the 5th or 6th of October, when he was given to understand that when the NAO kept insisting that he should come to Pune. If you listen to everything that he said, you'd realize that, and that whatever he spoke of was about the rights of Adivasis, rights of sections of society that have been oppressed for a very long time in our country, who are standing up to say that, we are citizens of this country, we have rights, and we want our rights to be respected. So he was only mentioning about them, and his entire work was around that. But most unfortunately, Father Stan is now in jail for almost a month. The prospects of him getting bail are almost impossible because the case under which he's been arrested, just to give you a small background, I really hope all my young friends who are here today, and I see there's a really large number of you over here, I really hope you'll are reading on some of these things, because like Father Stan says at the end, this is just not about him. This is something that there's a crisis in our country. So Father Stan has been arrested in what is now very famously known as the Bhima Koregaon case. I'll give you a very short history to that. Bhima Koregaon basically is a place near Pune, 200 years ago, around 202 years ago. A contingent of Mahars, that is a Dalit community, defeated the Peshwas. Given the caste realities that exist in our country, especially during those times, it was a victory that was celebrated of the oppressed sections, the oppressed castes against the oppressing castes. So every year, this happened on the 1st of January. So every year, what you have is on the 1st of January, lakhs of Dalits congregate in Bhima Koregaon. There's a big stump over there, what they call a Vijay stump. And they celebrate this victory, and they also, in a sense, reignite their own desire to ensure that caste is eradicated from our country, that people are treated, all castes are treated equally. So when the 200-year celebration of Bhima Koregaon was scheduled for 2018, one day before that, on 31st December 2017, there was a huge program held in Pune, what was known as the Elgar Parishad. The Elgar Parishad was coordinated by two retired judges. One was Justice P.B. Sawant, a retired judge of the Supreme Court, and one was Justice Kolse Patil, who is a retired judge of the Mumbai High Court. They both brought together all the Dalit organizations, and they organized the Elgar Parishad. More than 280 to 290 organizations from across Maharashtra participated. You can imagine the number of people who turned up for that program. And in that program, one of the main things that they spoke of was that the nature of our country is changing. That the dreams that the freedom fighters had, the dreams that the writers of the Constitution had, is something that is being shattered in our country. And they made the argument that India is becoming a fundamentalist country. India is losing its democratic essence, and in a way, fascism in the style of Nazi Germany of Hitler is coming into our country. That's broadly the kind of line that they took, and they said that this is something that we cannot accept. We will always uphold the Constitution in our country. Now, after that program was held on 31st December, the Bhima Koregaon celebrations took place. In the Bhima Koregaon celebrations, some of the right-wing groups, they attacked Dalits. There was killings, a lot of violence that took place. So there was a case that was registered against the right-wing organizations. The police did not take any action about that. They're still yet to take any action about that. Two of the main accused in the violence against the Dalits belong to right-wing Hindutva organizations. 8 days later, an FIR gets registered in regard to the Elgar Parishad, the public program that was held, in which they say that there was a conspiracy it's a Maoist conspiracy. I mean, and just the most, the kind of script writing that was entered into over there, because it's just any allegation was made. On the basis of that FIR, investigations were done, and 16 people have been arrested till now. Father Stan Swami is the last person who's been arrested. And like he said, there are several other people the other 15 people who've been arrested are lawyers, there are poets, there are intellectuals, there are Dalit activists who have been arrested, and they've all been languishing in jail without having gotten bail. Some of them have been in jail now for almost more than 2 years. So given that they haven't got bail because the offenses that they've been charged under is from waging war against India to sedition to offenses under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, UAPA. Now, what was, and like Father Stan said, what was it that Father Stan did? Father Stan has never been to Bhima Koregaon. In fact, the other accused, several of them have never been to Bhima Koregaon themselves. Most of them have not even attended this public program that was held on 31st December 2017. But they're all in jail. And if you were to believe the newspapers and the media, these are the most dangerous minds that exist in our country. Because today the media, we all see, they kind of just parrot exactly what the government, the present government wants them to say. So please bear that in mind while I take you through this small discussion. See, let us remember this, and I think Father Principal, while he in his introduction speech, touched upon the preamble of our country. I think you'll need to read the Constitution. You'll need to especially read the preamble of the preamble to the Constitution, because the preamble, in a way, you can say in somewhere that it's the dreams that it is the dreams with which our country was envisaged. The future of our country was envisaged. Now, the Constitution, as it were, was not a document that was prepared over one day. It was a document that was prepared over 3 years. Baba Sahib Ambedkar was the chairperson of the drafting committee. On 26th of January 1950 is when we adopted the Constitution. So the Constitution basically gives us an idea of what kind of nation we need to have. Just bear in mind that even at the time of the freedom struggle, there were several views on how India should be in the future. There was one line of thinking which was from right-wing forces, which was a very small force, which did not at that time, it's not like they were fighting against the British. They considered the Muslims and the Christians and the communists to be bigger enemies of theirs. They have the view that our nation should become a theocratic nation. It should be a Hindu Rashtra, as they called it, in which the people following one religion will predominate. There was also another, that was one view. There was another view, which was of you had one set of revolutionaries who believed that there needs to be a revolution, a complete overthrow of systems in our country. They believed in a sense in the violent line. You also then had the others, like the Congress or some of the other communist parties as well, the socialists, etc. Baba Sahib Ambedkar and his movement, who all decided that, see, we need to build a nation where we all are together. Because we have fought in this freedom struggle together, we need to live together after this. So which is why we have this constitution. This is the Constitution for everyone, and this is the preamble. I'm going to read the preamble, and I'm just going to then take a few minutes more on some of these aspects. So what does the preamble to our Constitution say? It says, "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation." So this is the preamble, and it gives you an idea of what our country is, what the dream was, and what our country is, and actually what lies in threat. So our country was meant to be a socialist country, which means that you have some semblance of equality at least. It's meant to be a secular country. A secular country means that there is a division between the state and the religion. Basically, it would mean that the state will not have a religion. Thirdly, it was supposed to be a democracy. Now, what do we mean by that? I mean, and we all understand this in civics, that we've learned that it's a government of the people, for the people, by the people. That's a very, very generic way of understanding democracy. But actually, democracy is a much more deeper sentiment than that, and I'll touch upon that after I finish this. And India was what was it supposed to secure for all its citizens? Justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Justice, liberty, freedoms, equality, and fraternity. Now, if you look at what's happening around us today, and let us be very honest, I think we are in a very, very dangerous time. A lot of, at least the present political dispensation, and a lot of organizations do not believe that our country should be a secular country. They do not believe that equality uh, should be something that we should aspire for. In fact, they would actively say that everyone is not equal in our country. Liberty is something that that is not being respected in our country. If you were to look at it, break it down, one of the most, I would say, most depressing kind of realities that we live in is the kind of hatred that is there in the minds of a large number of people. So if you were to, especially in regard to the Muslim community, so if you were to look at it, it ranges from a prejudice, from a harmless prejudice bias. There's no prejudice or bias that is harmless in any way. From a prejudice or bias, the spectrum is from a prejudice or bias to absolute hatred in regard to the Muslim community. It is almost a common sense that every Muslim should be looked at as suspect, and Muslims don't have equal rights in this country. That seems to be a kind of a sentiment that is trying to be made common sense. So the notion of fraternity, right? What does fraternity mean? Fraternity means of developing that associated living, of living together, of respect, of going through situations together. The very notion of fraternity today lies in shambles insofar as our country is concerned. So today, when you have all of this around you, I would say that, in this particular talk, when you say, know your rights before you fight, I think this is one of the most important things. We have to understand what is the idea of our nation, what is our nation meant to be, what are the threats to that, and then how do we tackle that? Because ultimately, if we do not raise our voices now, rest assured that the constitution will be consigned to the dustbin, as was warned by Baba Sahib Ambedkar many, many years ago. So what do you mean by a democracy? So I just wanted to, I mean, again, I would say that all of you, I think everyone's from political sciences, from what I have understood. So this is perhaps something that, you would have studied at length. But really, the spirit of democracy is something that we need to understand. And I think no person puts it in better words than Baba Sahib Ambedkar. So there is something that Baba Sahib Ambedkar said about democracy, which I'd like to read for you. He says, the roots of democracy lie not in the form of government, parliamentary or otherwise. A democracy is more than a form of government. It is primarily a mode of associated living. The roots of democracy are to be searched in the social relationship, in the terms of associated life between the people who form a society. So ultimately, that's where democracy will and can survive. It's only there that it derives any form of legitimacy from. There can be no democracy without a people believing in it, without a people that want to live that form of a democratic life. And when we talk of democracy, again, democracy is not just, I mean, very simply spoken, democracy is not just having elections and going and casting your votes. That's just not a democracy. That is just one aspect of a democracy. Democracy has several aspects. There's a political democracy, there's a social democracy, and there's a economic democracy. What is a political democracy? A political democracy in a parliamentary sense is one person, one vote. So whether you're the richest person in India or you're the poorest person in India, you will have just one vote, and your one vote will count only as one. It's not going to count as more than one. So that everyone understands. But actually, a political democracy stands on two pillars. One, that there is an opposition, and it's very, very important in a democracy that there is an opposition. Else, you immediately slip from a democracy to a autocracy. And secondly, free and fair elections. This is absolutely essential for any notion of a political democracy to survive. Secondly, the second aspect of democracy is the social democracy. So what is social democracy? Social democracy basically means the recognition of liberty, equality, and fraternity as the principle of life. And I think, see, this is one of the most maligned and one of the most targeted values at this point in time in our country. The notion that liberty, equality, and fraternity should be the principle of life. And thirdly, you have, of course, economic democracy, which means that the economic needs of people have to be satisfied. It's as simple as that. But if you look at where we are today, we are in a very, very dangerous situation. On the one hand, you have, for instance, just to give you an idea of how unequal our country is, from March till today, Mr. Mukesh Ambani, everyone has heard of, has been earning 90 crores per hour. Whereas the majority of Indians at this point do not even earn 300 rupees per day, the minimum, that kind of. So you're looking at a kind of a economic inequality which we have never seen before. So you have that which is growing. On the other hand, if you look at the kind of attacks that we see on the Dalit community, on women, the kind of control that is being exercised over women, I think that really puts us. We really need to hang our head in shame. If a 19-year-old or an 18-year-old Dalit girl is raped in Uttar Pradesh, and then she dies, and her parents are not even allowed for a cremation, that is not a very simple thing. That's a very, very huge crisis, and that, in a sense, is also an indicator of how entrenched the caste system in our country is. If I would just request all of you to just do one small Google search. You can look for the National Crime Records Bureau, NCRB, which documents cases, crimes in our country, and you'll find that in the last few years, the atrocity cases against Dalit community has increased and continues to increase. Likewise is the kind of violence against women. But it's not just violence. When we talk of a social democracy of liberty, fraternity, and equality, we talk about on an everyday basis. So it's not just a crime that is really a problem over here. That of course is a problem, but it's the everyday indignities that say somebody from the Dalit community has to face, or a woman has to face. For instance, if a girl is being told even today that that somebody in her house will control what she wears, where she goes, etc., then that is a very, very serious problem. So that's the kind of situation that's emerging. On the other hand, if you were to look at even say some of the checks and balances of democratic institutions, we see that there is a huge failure. Of course, one of the biggest failures I think in India has been the courts, but I'll talk about that next. The media is very important. As a pillar of democracy, one would have expected in a democracy, you expect the media to play the role of an objective questioner, of a mirror that is being held up that points out to what is wrong. In a sense, literally, it is the check and balance. But today you have a media that does not play that role. The media now basically just parrots whatever the current political dispensation and power wants it to parrot. And if you go back in history, you will see that the media played the very same role in Nazi Germany when Hitler came to power. Of course, it's very ironic. And let me make it very clear here that one of the people who I really don't think is a journalist, Mr. Arnab Goswami of Republic, was arrested this morning in regard to a particular crime. He's been accused in a case. It's not a new case. It was in 2018, where he was accused of abetting the suicide of two people. So today morning he's been arrested in that. See, this is something that I don't agree with it. I mean, I don't think, that arresting a person in a 3-year-old case, I don't think that you need to put people behind bars in general. Like, bail should be, as a matter of fact, bail should be a right. Jail should really be an exception. That's what the Supreme Court has laid down. So while I don't agree with, this kind of targeting of Arnab Goswami, even by the Congress government in Maharashtra, I would still say that Arnab Goswami should be tried, but not for that. Arnab Goswami should be tried for the hate speech that he has engaged in, for the hatred that he spreads against the minorities and the minorities in this country. But having said that, you can clearly see that the media is either a lapdog, it just completely parrots the line of the government, or it is being targeted. So, for instance, in Kashmir, journalists are jailed, journalists are beaten up. Greater Kashmir, which is one of the leading newspapers in Kashmir, its office has been closed down. So you see both aspects. The media itself is not allowed to function as it were. The most important check and balance is the judiciary. And most unfortunately, the judiciary is letting us down at the time when we really, really need the judiciary to stand up. To give you a very small example, the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh gave a speech just the other day, 3 days back, saying that they are going to introduce a law on love jihad. And if people do not, and saying, if those jihadis, if those people do not understand what I'm saying, then unka Ram Nam Satya is going to begin from here. Basically saying that they will be finished off. Now see, that is a threat. You don't expect a chief minister of a state to speak that kind of language. You could definitely agree with such kind of language if it came from any person. I'm okay with it. People having positions. We live in a free country. Everyone's entitled to their views. And in a democracy, we should be able to debate with each other. But a chief minister of a state using that kind of language, issuing threats from a public platform is something that's very, very worrisome. But you would not see that the courts take any of this seriously. We are not seeing the courts deal with so many matters. To give you one small example, there is a case called the electoral bonds case. So basically, the central government introduced a policy whereby anyone can contribute large amounts of money to political parties through electoral bonds, and their names and the source of the money will not be disclosed. Now that's basically making black money white. So that case has been challenged in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has still not heard that matter. It has kept it in the back burner. But other matters, the Supreme Court will hear. So today, when you have this kind of a situation, I would say, that we have reached a point where the very basis for our rights, which is a democracy, that is today at peril. If we are unable to save democracy in our country, which means we'll be unable to save our constitution in our country, then there's really nothing left. There is no equality left. There's no rule of law left. There is no right to dissent. And see, I'm saying this with great responsibility. Even as I speak here, I can easily understand there may be several people who disagree with me, and that is right. You have the right to disagree. But right now, what is happening is if you disagree, you will be sent to jail. That cannot be. In a democracy, that cannot be. We can disagree. We can continue to. We can be respectful of each other and disagree. That's a civilized way of being. Not to say that it's my way or the highway, or my way or the jail. So at this point in time, what you're seeing is that dissent is completely being clamped down. You cannot say anything against what the current government wants. So they introduced a law called the Citizenship Amendment Act, which a substantial population of this country does not agree with. That is their fundamental right. That cases that is also, they can express their dissent by filing cases in the court. They can express their dissent by fighting on the streets peacefully. Of course, no one is ever talking about anything that is violent. So you can express your dissent. That's what the Constitution gives you. The Constitution allows you the freedom of expression, the freedom to protest, the freedom to dissent. You have all of these rights. But today, if you say anything, like we are seeing in Delhi, a large number of students who are part of the anti-CAA protests are all languishing in jail. And these are absolutely brilliant, very, very clever, very intelligent people. In a sense, you'd imagine that It's great for our country that we have such bright young people who are willing to stand up for democracy. We may disagree with them, but they're willing to stand up for democracy in the constitutional way. And that is something that today is being clamped on in our country. And like I said, I think basically, just to conclude, I think the biggest battle we have since uh, at at this point in time, I would imagine the biggest battle we have is not against. I don't think it has to be against anybody, any political party or anything. If you don't want it, there are people there are political parties who do that. There's an opposition, so on and so forth. But what do we do? I think what we can really do, each one of us, is to ensure that firstly, we imbibe the constitutional values in ourselves. Let us start living that. If we believe in this nation of ours, if we love this great country of ours, and we want to see a bright future where everyone is happy, where like Rabindranath Tagore, where the mind is without fear, then we have to ensure that the constitution, the democracy in our country is saved. Because the democracy, it is the greatest gain that we had in our independence struggle. That's what the freedom struggle gave us. It gave us a democracy. We were no more under anyone else. We got the power to create our own rulers. So I would say that that's one thing we need to do. And secondly, we need to ensure that each and every one around us also internalizes these democratic values. If we don't internalize these democratic values, if we don't internalize the fact that ours is a diverse country, people from various religions, various communities, various cultures live here, and everyone has the equal right as anyone else, irrespective of religion, caste, gender, whatsoever. The moment we're able to do that, I think that will be one of the biggest successes we can do, because the moment everyone starts living by that constitutional values, we then have a hope in our country. Yeah. Thank you. Pratap, I'll end now because it's already 5:30 and I think we need to have at least 5 minutes of questions. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clifton. I'm sure this is one of the significant sessions we should have had probably quite long ago, and it is nice that we have had it in the evening. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matters to us. Our experience tells us that government can never be at the side of the oppressor, oppressed. It is always at the side of the oppressor, because they are in control of the resources. Dear friends, especially the young friends, the best government is the one which rules the least. And I always believe dissent is the best form of patriotism. My dear young friends, this is the time for you to put up your questions. Though we had another portal later, another meeting at 5:45, I thought this is very important for our youngsters to have a discussion, have a question, and then try to see how they can figure out their role in the country today. And therefore, I have extended it to till 6 o'clock if the speaker does not have problems. I think the questions have already started, being there on the chat box. Let me put up the first question. And the question reads like this: there are a lot of inequalities in the society, though we are educated, question mark. I'm sure you got the question.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't unmute. I think the fact that there's so much of inequality in our country, I don't know whether it has to do with just about education. I think it's also a lot. It's got to do with the economic policies that successive governments have undertaken. So when you talk, even when actually, I'm really grateful that you asked this question, because I should clarify one thing here. in India, democracy has always been it's been in the making. It's not a finished product. Something that, we've been learning as our nation has grown. And there have been several times when democracy has come under threat in our country. Of course, we can never ever forget the black days of the emergency of Indira Gandhi, when the entire constitution, the fundamental rights of people itself was suspended. Those were really, really dark days. Our country has also seen, that these kinds of assaults on the democracy is something that repeatedly happens, but we've always been able to bounce back. We've been able to bounce back because we believed that, the democratic way is the best way forward. Now, coming to your question, I think the problem lies in the economic policies that we are taking. Just to give you a very small example. So from March till now, hello, can you see me?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Continue.
I was audible, right, Mrs. Rose? I'll just answer this question anyway. Like I was saying that, the economic policies is where the problem lies. You need to have economic policies. You need to have an approach to ensuring economic democracy in this country by acknowledging that inequality is something that is unacceptable to us. I remember, I've studied in history that when Indira Gandhi was there, she used to have the slogan called "Garibi Hatao, Desh Bachao." Now, those days are gone, and poverty has become much more entrenched in our society. So, until and unless you come up with policies with an economic thinking which is not market driven, which is not something that sides with a handful of elite, until then, I don't think there's any way going forward. To give you a small example, post the pandemic has devastated the world. It's not just our country, it's devastated the world. We've all seen that. Lakhs and lakhs of people whose lives are lost. Economies have been completely broken in light of these coronavirus. In our country, we had a lockdown, and after the lockdown, you see what happened. There were lakhs of people, migrant workers, who literally went walking back to the houses. That was the kind of trauma that they went through. But what we did not see is that after that, in fact, I'd request each of my friends over here, you please sit and think about what I'm going to say now, and think about it not in general, from your own family and friends. How many of the people who have lost their jobs? How many of them have been unable to pay their rents? How many of them have unable to pay loans that they may have taken? How many of them may not have lost their jobs, but their salaries have all been reduced? So what you actually see is that for the last 6 months, there's been devastation of the working class. People are facing a complete struggle just to survive. What should the government do at this time? At this time, the government should introduce certain policies, should stand with the people and say that, see, we will ensure that you don't lose your job. We will ensure that your salaries are protected. We'll ensure that no one can, oppress you. That's what the government should do. Most unfortunately, or what the government is doing is introducing laws which are completely against the workers. So, for instance, the central government has introduced 4 codes, labor codes, to replace all the labor laws that exist, the major central labor laws that exist. And in a way, what it's going to do, it's going to make the workers, the working class, far worse off than they ever were. It's going to be difficult for them to form unions, difficult for them to engage in collective bargaining. Minimum wage is going to be very, very poor. Basically, workers are not going to be without any rights. So when a government responds in this fashion, then the workers have to stand up. So just to let you know, on 26th of November, all the trade unions of the country have come together, and they're having a one-day strike, saying that we are the ones who suffered because of the pandemic, not the rich. So you cannot bring in any law that makes us even worse. So my dear friend, unless we realize that these kinds of policies are the root cause of inequality, besides, of course, the fact that there is caste-based inequality also that happens, it also has an economic side to it. Unless we're able to address these 2 things, it is very, very difficult for us to address inequality. Thank you.
There are a lot of questions, and I'm sure I would be able to actually summarize them and would be able to put it across. We have Mohammed who would like to ask a question saying that, whether you have any suggestions for the youngsters to change the way the government operates in the country today.
Mrs. Rose, I'll just take I'm seeing the questions. I'll just answer one by one and I'll go. It's fairly simple.
Okay, that would be better. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. Like I said, see, unless we realize that there is a risk, there is no question of trying to save something. So if the absolute poverty that exists in our country does not trouble us, then we're not going to find ways around it. If the fact that there is still caste system in our country and it does not trouble us, then there's no way of fighting it. So I think the first step is, even as youngsters, to identify and acknowledge what are the problems that ail our country. And like I said, democracy itself is at peril, and that is one of the things that has to be done. And I would say that we use the constitution to save the constitution. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, in fact, when he gave the constitution to the country, he gave a speech in 1950 in which he said, that we have to adopt the ways of the constitution, else there is no other way forward. He also then says that in our country, we only have political democracy, but unless we ensure social and economic equality, democracy is not going to survive. So I would say we learn from what he said. We ensure that we take these values to the people and we stand up for the constitution at any given point in time, irrespective of what the risks are. Craig D'Souza has asked me whether the pulling of Arnab Goswami by his hair was the right thing. I mean, there's no question about it. No one can even agree with that. Any form of police excess, any form of overreach by any institution is unacceptable. I don't like Arnab Goswami, but I think Arnab Goswami has the right to say what he wants to say, as long as he's not inciting hatred. He definitely has the right to be treated with respect. Even if there's an allegation against him, he should be treated equally like all other citizens and given every protection that everyone wants. Under no circumstances should any person in this world, let alone Arnab Goswami, be treated disrespectfully or violently by any police authority. There's a question from Rexman about the judiciary. See, I mean, you're right. But the point is that, we have to stand up and say that the judiciary cannot stay silent. There's just no other way. We have to make ourselves be heard, and we have to make whatever values we stand for, we have to try and ensure that they get as universalized in our country as much as possible. Okay, there's a question about why, how do we ensure that this totalitarian rule that's taking roots in our country is prevented? My entire talk has been just about that. I think we use every single platform that is available to us to raise our voices. We have to fight against any kind of injustice. Every form of injustice that happens, it is something that should hurt us, and that is something that we should fight. That is the only way. There's absolutely no other shortcut. One of our friends has asked, secularism is under attack and states have enacted anti-conversion laws. So what do you got to say about that? See, actually, let me tell you about secularism, because there's one big lie that keeps getting floated, that secularism was not in our constitution and it was introduced by Indira Gandhi during emergency. I think it was the 42nd constitutional amendment. Now, there cannot be anything that is further from the truth. Secularism as a concept was always there in our constitution. For instance, Article 25 of the constitution gives us the right to practice whatever religion that we want. Now, Article 25 has always been in the constitution. Let me read that out to you. What Article 25 says is, all persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience and the right freely to profess, practice, and propagate religion. Please note, this is what the constitution says. You can practice, you can profess a religion, you can practice a religion, you can propagate a religion. That is your fundamental right. You cannot forcibly convert someone. That, of course, is something that cannot be done. But you can propagate your religion. That is a right that our constitution gives us. And there's no need for us to, feel bad about that. In fact, this secularism, according to the Supreme Court, one of the biggest judgments that the courts have ever passed, It says that secularism is part of the basic structure of the constitution. What does that mean? It means that the constitution can be amended, right? You'll all know that governments come to power, they amend certain parts of the constitution. But the Supreme Court has held that there are certain parts of the constitution that cannot be amended. One of those parts that cannot be amended is secularism. So as long as this constitution stands, secularism is the ruling norm of our nation, and people who are not comfortable with that will willy-nilly have to grow comfortable with that. They cannot turn this into a theocratic state. One of our friends has said that, even in regard to Father Stan Swami, there's so much of support, but the government is not responding. I don't expect the government to respond to this immediately. The government is testing how much it's testing you. It's testing you. It's testing me. It's testing people who believe in this constitution as to how far we will stand up and keep raising our voices. So I would say that, the question is not just about the government hearing. We have to stand up and raise our voices so that the people know exactly what is in this country, because ultimately it is the people that make the government. It's not the government that makes us. Okay, the other questions are basically more or less a repetition of the same. But there was one question on what effect will dissent have on a blind and deaf government? Like I said, see, dissent is really, if you don't dissent, you are not protecting. If you're not going to dissent, they are not going to stand up for what is right. As long as we keep raising our voices, there is then another voice. If we don't raise our voices, if we don't say that, see, something is wrong, we don't accept it, it's something that has to change. If you don't do that, then the other voice itself is gone. Then you're going to end up in an autocracy. You're going to basically end up in a totalitarian regime. And today, I think more than ever before, we really have to be careful. We have to keep raising our voices. I'll just give you a very small example. On 20th of October, there were raids carried out across India. I'm sure you all read it in the newspapers. Raids were carried out in Srinagar, in Delhi, and in Bangalore. The raids were carried out by the NIA, the same NIA that has arrested Father Stan. That's the National Investigation Agency. They raided all these places and they put out a press note. And of course, the press note is what is published in the newspapers and the TV. So people have only seen that. What does the press note say? It says that the NIA has registered an FIR that certain organizations and individuals are getting foreign funding and they are supporting terror activities in Kashmir. I'm sure all of you did that. Now, this is the sad part. The media should have gone behind the picture. Who were the ones who were raided? The people who were raided were not any terrorists. The people who were raided, the organizations who were raided, were those who were democratically saying that, see, something is wrong. They were pointing out to problems. They were saying that if there was a violation of the rights of any oppressed sections, they were raising the voice about that. Other than that, they didn't do anything. They were publishing reports that were printed in and put in on the website. They were publishing reports and submitting it to the government, saying that please note that this is something is wrong. This is oppression. This is a violation of so-and-so person's rights. You have to change it. These are the organizations that have been raided, and now it is made it out to be that every one of them is some kind of a terrorist. So really the media is making a very, very big disservice to us. Vishnu Bhatt has asked a question. I think it's more of a comment included in a question. He says that the government is responsible for poverty as people losing their jobs, so that they're not saving. Okay, he's basically saying that the government is not to blame. I'll give you a very small example, Vishnu. Okay, and this is just for your, if you can just think about it. The government, after the lockdown was declared, all of the unions raised their voices and said that, see, you're declaring a lockdown. It's on 24th of March. People are going to lose their salary because they're not going to get their salary in the next month. So you have to ensure that workers get their salary. So the government then passed an order where it said that irrespective of the lockdown, everyone should be paid their wages. Fair and that's the order of the government. And it was on the demands of the trade unions. It was not complied with. No company did that. So when the workers started demanding that, see, you obey that order of yours. That is a government order. You have to obey it. And when they went to the labor department, they did the protest. There was absolutely no support from the government. Absolutely no support from the government. There is no organization, no company, no establishment which did not pay wages to workers where the government has taken action against them. It's done nothing. So I would say, that there's one thing that you keep hearing, that people are lazy, all these poor people are lazy, slum dwellers are lazy. I would only say this, if you were to live the life of a slum dweller for 1 week and then come back and tell me that they're lazy, then perhaps I'll take your word for it. But the people who do the hardest work, the hardest physical work, in fact, are those who are the most poor in this country. So calling them lazy and saying that's their fault, I don't think is a correct way forward. Yeah, a very interesting line from Christina. Thank you. So if we are to be the voice of the voiceless, then first we must have our own voice with all rights. I think, there are two ways of looking at this. Everyone has a voice. It's just about us having to recognize that we have the right to express our voice, and we have the right to say if something is wrong. So I think it's not about, of defending, more than standing in solidarity, of ensuring that all of us, we can come together, because there's really, what are we coming together for? We are not coming together for some larger, any kind of an individual kind of a need. We are coming together because we are saying that we want the constitutional dreams to be realized in our country. And I don't think that there can be any better motive than that. And no one can have a problem with that. Do we have time, or are we done?
Yeah, I think the questions are, I think, more or less answered, well answered. There are a few questions on the YouTube which speaks about whether, which is the best country which has actually looked into these protection of democratic rights and things of that sort for a longer time. I leave it to you for another 2 minutes to give your comments, and then probably we wind it up.
Actually, it's a very interesting question, because there was a very recent report by this organization called Dissent. Basically, we-them. It's an organization that monitors the democracies across the country, whether how liberal democracies are faring. So in their most recent report, it's a very disturbing report. What they actually tell us is that for the first time since 2001, there are more autocracies than democracies in the world. So more and more countries are actually slipping into autocracies. A lot of countries that are democratic, like say the US or India, here again you're having a serious regression into away from democracy. But there's a very interesting thing that it also says. It says that as we see democracy under assault in so many countries across the globe, you also see a concomitant rise in people's struggles, in protests, saying that they want democracy, which is resulting in changes in many countries. So for instance, if you were to look at Bolivia, where they've been having mammoth democratic peaceful protests over the past for quite a while now, because they want democracy to be saved in the country. Another country which is seeing mammoth kind of protests is Poland, where the government and the court over there have come together to ban abortions. So lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of women have taken to the streets saying that we have right over our body. No one can tell us what we should do with it. You all are aware of what's happening in Hong Kong. So I don't see any reason for being pessimistic. I think the Constitution in any way gives us a lot of optimism. But outside of that, I see, if you look across the world, more and more people are fighting to ensure that that these human values are protected in their own countries. And I would say that that's something that we should take solace from.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm happy that we could actually have a kind of interactive session with you, and we could listen to you, partly because I think people like you are a force to reckon with. I think people like Clifton are contributing a lot to the society by giving a voice to the voiceless and fighting for the rights of those neglected. I am sure if you just Google and then see, what Clifton de Rosario has done to the society, it is marvelous. I'm sure we will have this, discussion continue in the future days to go, and then see how best we could work for the society as Clifton de Rosario is doing. Thank you so much on our behalf, and we have a formal vote of thanks to be, I think, given from Ashakiran. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the participants for your wonderful questions. And youngsters, I'm sure we have a greater role to play. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir, for this enlightening session. And thank you, ma'am, for effectively animating this session. And thank you, dear participants, for your valuable queries. I'm sorry if some of your questions have not been answered due to time constraints. As the saying goes, one can pay back the loan of gold, but one dies forever in debt to those who are kind. We now have Brother Pankaj to propose the vote of thanks.
Randy Posh, a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, has beautifully said, showing gratitude is one of the simplest yet most powerful things humans can do for each other. With the heart full of gratitude, I, on behalf of Ashakiran and St. Aloysius College, Mangalore, would like to take this opportunity to place on record our heartfelt thanks to Mr. Clifton de Rosario, advocate, for willingly accepting our invitation for this webinar, Know Your Rights Before You Fight. Dear Sir, your broader knowledge of the Indian Constitution and your interest in spreading constitutional awareness is known to us by your excellent coverage of today's webinar, Know Your Rights Before You Fight. A big thank you for gracing your presence and sharing with us your knowledge and opinions. We are grateful to Dr. Reverend Father Praveen Martis S.J., the principal of St. Aloysius College, for being a guiding force in organizing this webinar. Thank you, Father, for making the platform available to us and also for addressing us. We thank Dr. Rose Vera, the head of the Department of Political Science, and her team for their collaboration and enormous cooperation in organizing this webinar. We thank Father Alphonse Fernandez, S.J., the superior of Ashakiran, and the Ashakiran community for their constant support and guidance for the success of this webinar. We thank our technical team for all the technical arrangements which has led to a smooth flow of this event. Your cooperation is well recognized and appreciated. We also thank all those who have worked tirelessly behind the screen to make this event successful. Finally, our heartfelt gratitude goes to all of you, dear participants, for your keen interest and attentive listening. It's because of your active participation, this webinar has become a memorable one. Once again, thank you one and all.
Thank you, Brother Pankaj, for the vote of thanks. Thank you to all the presidents and secretaries and the members of all the associations attending this webinar, and all of you, dear participants, for making this webinar meaningful and a successful one. The feedback link has been sent in the chat box and in the comment section of the YouTube live stream. Please fill up the form and submit in half an hour. You can always contact us for any queries. Your certificate will be issued to you within 48 hours. Thank you all once again and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you. Bye.